Welcome to Mindful Drawing. I'm Rooks Fun, and I'll be your guide on this meditation practice that combines presence and awareness, creativity with drawing. It engages with our presence in space, with our physical interaction with the medium of the paper, the instrument of the pen or pencil, and with the larger creative act of drawing as a way of expressing some of our internal thoughts, whims, binds, visions, whatever they may be, outwards into the world through that piece of paper, a chance to let things out and maybe through the end reabsorb and let those things back in that cycle or rhythm of reflection, of release, of contemplation, of resolve. This week's exercise will look to the sun. Early morning here in the east, I look out of my window across the horizon of buildings, the sun coming up early, and find inspiration there of this brilliance or radiance, casting of rays, combing over a landscape, finding new silhouettes, new shapes when things blend and merge, extensions of shadows, bending and blurring, the streaks passing through the clouds. This picture painting for you in your mind can be the beginning of how we enter into a landscape of light, filling the emptiness, finding the shape of shadow. And we'll begin with a little exercise and warm up on horizon, finding your own way to enter into that line or interface that separates above and below, of far and closer, of ground and sky. All you need is a pen or pencil and a piece of paper. I use a Bristol pad and just a standard pen here on my desk. A few pencils nearby if I ever feel to grab for them for a little softer, lighter touch. So go ahead and gather your supplies, establish your space, and let's draw together. Struggling a little bit and just stared outside into the sun for a while and thought that might be a good enough place to begin. So we'll look at casting some rays and projecting the horizon. Maybe a little bit of other experiments in there. Looks like everything's running and rolling, so go ahead and get started. For the warm-up, I think the thing we can think about is a horizon somewhere. Simply could just be a line across a page, I guess held there horizontally, and some things that could populate that. Each of us can make our own little story. There could be potentially a little mountain on the horizon, or maybe some little buildings, or maybe just a tree or two, or anything else you'd like to make up in that sense. So we'll use just a minute or so here in the warm-up to think of making that all as one kind of continuous line. If it wants to be more urban or rural, abstract, or more natural landscape flowing along, far or near, how you want to see it. We're just trying a few different lines across the page that bring top and bottom together around a singular interface. And whatever you start to settle in on in your interest, it could also just be abstract shapes, something fun undulating up and down along that continuous edge there between what's above and below. And we'll take that to our larger exercise, and then from whatever occupies that horizon territory, we'll add a little bit of light behind it, a sun or something. You can use your current setup to play, to have a large kind of sun forming behind something, small little moon peeking out, some kind of source of light in the background. This kind of inspired by a graphic trend I see a lot in some students' work. Just put a nice circle in the background somewhere for the composition, but also looking out across the horizon and how that bright star frames the silhouettes in the foreground. In our warm-up here is just a chance to try a bunch of ideas and see where we might go with the larger drawing. Why don't we, as we transition, take just a moment to look over what we've explored in terms of the horizon's interface and that mediating disk or light device within it, and form a little picture or loose plan in the mind of how you might bring that here onto the page. And after a couple of grounding breaths, breathing in just to expand left and right, forward and back, up and down, and out to relax into a nice position for the spine, for the shoulders, for the seat. A second large breath just for good measure to settle everything in. And then finding on that new piece of paper where to begin the dividing across, left or right, right to left, the starting of action, a breath in to stabilize and establish in the mind some of that intent of this first line, and then as you breathe out, just beginning to draw maybe some bumps and hills, maybe a few things standing upwards. Maybe a nice long plain. Some little squiggles of a forest. The extension of the Earth's crust up into a protrusion of a mountain and its foothills. And then as you reach across whatever paper or page you're on, that line becomes our grounding, our foundation. It might be nice to take a second breath and move across it again just to enhance it, give it a little dimension and weight of the pen or pencil. Perhaps to break it up a little bit or fill in some gaps. Trying to keep it as one clean interface or line between the top half and the bottom half. Just the tracing over of the former action and embedding or taking in of that first narrative journey along the horizon's transition. And it establishes that heavier delineation between the two places, thickening that place of interface. Now along there, you can decide at any place where that light source from behind might come into play. I think I'll draw mine with some dashes just coming up out of the ground, and an even rhythm, breathing in on a line, out on a line, to begin to form that circle. And it can wobble a little, the dashes giving it a looser connection. But if it's a solid line, that's fine too. And whether it's a solid line, maybe another retracing, just to give it an edge, lightly next to, inside of, or out of, establishing its presence and its blurring boundaries. Next, we can bring that light out into the landscape from wherever its rough center might be. Rays will project outward along the edges of things, starting with an edge of some object, extending out through the page lightly. The mountain I have here, a frame for that light to leak outwards, a ray cast over it from the center, and finding its shadow shape will be a part of our entrance into the drawing. The shadow, a reflection of itself, moving outwards along the same rays of the sun, but bending with the distance. The shadow may begin out and then fold along the lines of the edges, extending its shape like a mirror into the other direction, and then returning and folding back in, a stretched reflection of it out into the landscape. And any other bumps, twists, turns, objects there. Again, they extend some of their edges out from the center of the disc, so finding the two sides, stretching them out along into space, lightly or intently firm, whichever feels right, just finding a track from that disc outward, wherever there's a disturbance to the horizontal of that landscape. Choosing any which one, beginning again to reflect it out there into the territory, bound by the rays of light, subtly taking on the shadow of the figure that we may see in the original. Tracking with your eye the edges above, out into a similar shape on the edges below. Being just in the moment of the tracking, extending. Many will probably be distorted, shaped a little different than their original counterparts, and that's okay. That's part of our exercise here. Seeing and engaging, finding connection between the outer world on the paper and the inner world of our control of the hand. And we can bring some more rays in the quiet spots, in the flat spots, just letting them define some of that territory here on the page. Generally running parallel to each other. Little bumps and deviations, capturing the landscape on that blank paper as it may move up and down, it may twist and fold. It reveals itself through our action and interaction with that page. Some crisp and precise, some may wobble. That just becomes the contours of the landscape, fanning out roughly from that centroid of the large disc in the background, bringing light and dimension into the world. You can play a bit with density. Right now, we're in an establishing, extending from that horizon, getting to fill in some below at this point. We'll look at entering into the space above as well. Perhaps bringing the rays of the shadow into the sky, rays of the light into the sky. But before we go to that side, we now have these vast territories of emptiness bound by light contours. This could be an opportunity to express or celebrate that emptiness, either by enhancing the edges of the shadow, tracing along it again, or finding a new technique, or filling the space of shadow. I think for a time, we'll bring a lightness, a fuzziness to that edge of the shadow, just with a little kind of dashing of the line, a light retracing out along the rays, but quick movements, and use this repetitive softening action of the edge to enter into some breath exercise before we move into the sky. Here, the hand moving at a regular pace, a rhythm, kind of a toning. We begin to count with that rhythm, maybe move and engage all of our body with that rhythm, even into the breathing, the replenishing a breath in on the count of strokes. 1, 2, 3, 4. Be a hold for a moment as we keep the hand moving, and a breath out on the count of strokes. 1, 2, 3, 4. Again, there may be a hold or a pause, starting with the 4 count. 1, 2, 3, 4 on the in, and the 4 count. 1, 2, 3, 4 on the out. I'll guide for a few, so find your pacing of the motion, breathing in 1, 2, 3, 4, breathing out 1, 2, 3, 4. Does that align with the motion of your hand? Find it on kind of a double time rhythm. In 1, 2, 3, 4. Out 1, 2, 3. What rhythm are you beginning to find that you can now spend some time practicing in your own space, in a few minutes of quiet, finding that measure as we transition an edge different from the horizon? Find your count, find your rhythm, and practice it with the edges of the shapes. Feel free to leak into them if you like. Go back over to find more time with the breath. And wrap up a few of your final oscillations of the count. We'll begin to transition from below the horizon to above, extending into that emptiness to form boundaries, to express the extension of light through the atmosphere. It'll take just a moment for everyone to find a natural conclusion to the counting of the breath, maybe to give the hand a moment to relax after that repetitive, short, quick movement. And whether your disk of light is perfectly smooth and round at its edges, or has the little gaps like mine, anywhere along that disk, we can begin to extend rays through the sky, grabbing a point and just moving out into the space. If it moves towards the horizon, it stops where it lands. And with each one of these rays, a chance to really release into that motion of the drawing, filling the lungs with air and finding the beginning of the ray. And then on the exhalation, extending slowly with the breath out across the territory of the page, letting the breath end as the line ends, and through several of these, finding that connection of speed and movement and breath. And if it ever becomes uncomfortable, you can always breathe in again, but trying each time as a chance to match that speed. Breathing in at the beginning and exhaling through the extension of the ray out through the atmosphere, out across the page. Filling up that void with a little bit of light, rays cast through the emptiness, things we see but can't see, finding representation through that expression of the line guided by our centering, our holding of space with the breath inside the torso and the lungs, our filling of space as the breath exhales out around us into the atmosphere. Slowly working our way around, casting out into the emptiness, each line defining a new relationship between the voids of the page. New neighbors, tracking across the sky, filling in an expression of radiance. And if you make your way around, you can always add a little more definition to that disk of light, perhaps even allowing some of it to cast out along the rays, just expanding the disk. The sun gradually dissipating through our atmosphere, bouncing, reflecting light. And maybe after a few moments, as we all come and complete our casting outwards and rays, we can find a little space between them to experiment with some shadows and just draw into the little world forming here. We have some clouds mostly seen in between the highlights of the rays, just puffing back and forth, undulating in and around. The light splitting through them, maybe they occasionally leak inward here and there. Ghosts or shadows through the brightness. It's the chance to move that pen a little bit, play into this space opened between the rays cast through the sky. Can we take in from that time of breath, of extension, of finding measure and regulation, and then of calm, slow expansion and contraction, to find looseness or relaxation from that time, a softness to the drawing, maybe holding the pen or pencil more brush-like, letting it fall gently on the page, the edges not needing to be too hard or well-defined, just a haze in the atmosphere, some moisture, vapor, kind of there and kind of not, the clouds taking some shape, but also split and refracted by the rays of the light. And we have just a couple of minutes left to the exercise today, so wherever you're at with that, a playing of softness in the clouds, an exploring of the void, or re-engaging with new areas on the landscape, bringing depth to the shadow, continuing to extend those lines and rays into the spaces left empty by the absence of light. And have just a couple minutes to have a little fun exploring the little world forming there. It's the start of a longer exploration, just a little moment there on the paper to start the day. Little sun, the rays cast into our eyes, some fresh electrons and photons bouncing around to bring warmth and light to our space. As we come to a close in the exercise, bring the pencil to rest, give the hands a little bit of a stretch after that, all that quick movement with the wrists, maybe roll them both around for good measure. Whether you're drawing right-handed or left-handed, both of them behaving as two parts of our whole, divided around our verticon. And a couple of breaths to seal out the practice and just roll into the shoulders. A couple of breaths to be present again in the space. Take in maybe the light around you if you have some natural light. And an exhalation to close the practice. Thank you for joining. These short exercises just have a chance to dabble in a bit of the technique, to explore the rough construction of a world, but even in the little time together of finding the definition of that boundary, that horizon between sky and ground, and then looking at how it might interact with a heavy source of light in the background, beginning to silhouette and cascade across the landscape, can bring subtle hints of imagination, can start the process of creative exploring, being present with ourself, with our action here, expressed outward onto the paper, a chance to create, a chance to build a little world, go into it, have its own little games and rules, have its own expression of how that source of light cascades through sky and overground, and that projection of rays of light combing out through the universe, photons traveling on their trajectory, slightly bent or perturbed now and again by gravity, by an atmosphere. That projection of rays of light, of photons moving out into the universe, gently guided by the gravity or the friction of an atmosphere, cast and bounced across a surface blocked by others, shadow and tone, light and emptiness, filling up the space of the paper, a technique from the canon of drawing, right? These parallel or converging rays across the landscape, whether perspective or orthographic, structuring the way we see things, mimicking the way we've experienced things in the world, quickly building up a plausibility to that landscape on the paper here in this drawing, or in any case, giving dimension to the things, objects, territories that we might draw with. And taking from this exercise a chance to explore that loosely, to have some fun with it, and see if it might extend further into anything you do with your creative time. We'll bring the video and the exercise to a close. If you liked it, please give it a thumbs up, share it with your friends, and leave a comment down below. You can catch us here on YouTube with new videos, usually every Wednesday morning, or if you want to find it live, you can go search for Mindful Pratt and find their drop-ins to join us on Zoom on Tuesday mornings at 9 a.m. I also stream them over on Twitch at the same time if you'd like to watch there. Well, I've been inspired by the light, feathery touch of those kind of cascading shadows leaking across the landscape, and think I'll spend a few more minutes drawing. Whatever you're doing for the rest of the day, I hope it's good, and I look forward to drawing together again next week. Until then, draw well. Thank you.